Yes, people, welcome back to the channel. I know it's been a little while. I've been off ill a little bit, but do you know something? I've recorded like 3 or 4 videos in the last month, and I've just not been able to upload them because shit keeps happening. Basically, stuff keeps happening. I think I've done 2 videos based on comments, the ownership, or comment, or like reports have come out about Amorim and his job security. And I feel like now that we've had a bombshell from a couple of days ago from Sir Jim Ratcliffe, I think it's probably the best time to actually record this now. So yeah, obviously we felt like a bit of a bombshell. Fresh quotes from Sir Jim about Ruben Amorim's job security and the timescale he thinks is fair before making a final judgment. It sent the socials, X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, sent it into a bit of an overdrive. Myself included a little bit, because they were quite significant comments to make. At first glance, when you read the quotes, it sounded wild, but after a couple of days to think about it, videos coming out about the comments showing it in a bigger context, I actually don't think it's quite as drastic as it's first looked. So the key line was the 3-year line. Ruben needs to demonstrate he's a great coach over 3 years. That's where I would be, because football's not overnight. And he even doubled down when pressed. He said, yes, 3 years. On the one hand, yes, it reads like Ineos's original intent. Our first big appointment gets a full runway. I've already mentioned somewhere that there's a bit of sunk cost fallacy with the ownership, with Ruben Amorim. The first big appointment they've made, obviously, so they want to stick by him as best as they can. On another level, however, it could just sound like an owner saying the right things publicly. We saw him say something about Ten Hag a year ago, that I like Ten Hag, good coach, but they're footballing people to make choices or whatever. If they need to, they would, something along those lines. I can't quite remember. So obviously, this is Ineos's guy, their first big call. They've spoken obviously about 2028 targets, long-term relevance, and not running United by knee-jerk reactions. Which, on the face of that, I can agree with, because you can't run this football club by headlines. Yes, I know United make the headlines, but you can't run it based off that. But, and it's quite a big but, we're now 11 months into this. Year 1 of Ruben Amorim has been really poor. If your stance is 3 years regardless, you risk eroding the standards. Patience has to be earned by seeing something worth waiting for. It was bad enough, obviously, we finished 15th last season, that the bar is so low now. It's arguably a limbo, and whatever we do this season could just be an improvement. But we can't really just look at, we finished 10th this season, which is an improvement on last season. So you look at this, you do a ceiling check for me. So how do you judge a coach? I don't think you can really judge a coach on whether he can scrape 7th, but more whether you can imagine him leading United to a title challenge or a deep Champions League run. And from what I've seen so far, I don't think I do, unfortunately. Could he prove me wrong? Sure. And if he proves me wrong, fantastic, because it means United are flying. United are good. There's a reason I'm sitting here doing a YouTube video about it rather than sitting on a board of directors saying my piece. But the thing is, it likely needs real tweaks to his game model, not just short-term job-saving compromises. Not just that, but also I think he has to believe himself again. That aura and conviction we saw when he first came in, it feels like it's just faded under pressure, which we've seen over the last 10 years, no matter how experienced or inexperienced the coaches have been at United. It's a tax. That is literally a tax they've had to pay. You go look at photos of each manager we've had, and then when they go out the door, it doesn't look like they've aged well. I think, obviously, I agree with patience, not knee-jerk to a point. You know, Ratcliffe said you can't run United by knee-jerk or media pressure, which is true. But blind faith can be just as dangerous. We as the fans did that for Ten Hag a lot of the 23-24 season. And patience needs value behind it. So clear ideas, physical progress, adjustments that actually optimize the squad. And we have one game a week and enough quality to set a minimum target where I think top 6 should be the floor, the bare minimum. And that's not me being like starry-eyed. That's the bar for me for United. If we're really in a transition phase of some format, if this manager is a bridge manager to take us from the bad stuff to get us into a good position, whether it be for himself to challenge or whether for someone else to come in and challenge, that should be the bar for me, regardless. I mean, owners can set a 3-year horizon, granted, but football is quite fickle. You know, if you get, obviously, we just beat Sunderland, but a bad run, you know, Liverpool, Brighton, mood shifts. We've already seen it. We beat Chelsea one week and then we lose to Brentford. The goodwill evaporates. You know, the goodwill evaporates in the weekend. And then you spend the rest of the week like almost, your week is ruined, waiting for the next weekend to come by. So, I mean, I've always said this isn't just on the manager, this is also on the board. They're supposed to be best in class. And I stand by that statement I've made about them initially hiring him, where it was quite naive to do that mid-season, expecting to turn it around with little recruitment. And especially when the data and the sporting director you had showed that he wasn't going to be a good fit. And right now, obviously, we need to see this best in class. We need to see it in recruitment, clarity, and standards. And right now, it feels like their reputations are wedded to Amorim. You know, if he fails, Ineos are judged for it too. That's why it feels insulated. It's almost, you get this with managers who come in with one system and one idea, and when it's not working, they're so wedded to it and they're so stubborn to it. They're almost married to that concept because their reputation is on the line for it. So I feel like it's the same with Amorim and his formation as it is in a way to Ineos and Amorim. First big call. He's there for a reason. That's why he's there. So he's going to do everything he can to make it work. I mean, where I land today, I just want him to show me something. Get a run of wins. You know, win 4 of the next 5, please. Do I think he gets to January? Based on the fact of this statement, maybe. End of the season, only if there's evidence. But I think there needs to be more from the manager. Tactical tweaks that fit the players and profiles he's got. You know, a cohesive and sustainable build-up and pressing structure. You know, even results to an extent. They set a minimum standard. Top 6 pace with 1 game a week. Come on. Otherwise, we're just doing 60 mile an hour on a motorway to nowhere, aimlessly. And then you just can't have that. You set targets for 2028. You've got to do your best to match those targets. And I worry that maybe Amorim isn't that guy for it. So what do you think? Does Ratcliffe's 3-year line reassure you, or does it feel like moving the goalposts a little bit? I mean, I think reading the comments more, I do kind of see the fact that he's probably saying it in a way that says, well, I'd love to give him 3 years to turn it around, 3 years to build something and be ready to challenge. But if he's not, I'm not going to keep him for 3 years for the sake of it. That's what I want to read the comments as a little bit. But I'm not Sir Jim Ratcliffe, so I don't know what's going through his head. I think the Arteta comparison is poor because, firstly, Arteta won a trophy in his first 6 months. And secondly, if the fans were in stadiums during COVID, Arteta might have got the sack. And I just think that the one thing I think probably the benchmark for a project is Klopp. And I said this on Keane Talks United. Shout out to Keane for having me on there. And I said to him that Klopp and Arteta both came in mid-season, then had 2 full years. And in those 2 full years, after those 2 full years, they were in a title challenge. Their third full season, both were in a title challenge. Both didn't win the league. Klopp obviously kicked on and won the league in a year where everyone fell off pretty much, and Arteta couldn't capitalise on the position he was originally in, and then further on, he hasn't been able to win the title as of yet. I don't really want Arteta to be the benchmark because he's not really won anything. I think the way I see it with Ruben Amorim is I need to see something, because it's also, I hate those tweets where they say it took Klopp 3-4 years, it took Arteta 5 years, but it didn't. They showed at least some kind of progress. In the meantime, it's not a case of we're crap for 4 or 5 years and then suddenly we win the league. It doesn't work like that. You know, that's why I don't want to sit here and say if you give Ruben Amorim 2 new wing backs and a whole whole pair of midfielders, will everything change? I don't know. We could still get cut open in the same way because the pressing structure isn't that great sometimes. So I think where I go with that is football is a business. You're in the business of winning and getting results, especially at a club like this. So I just think that don't be naive to weld yourself to this manager because he's your first big call. You're better off admitting the mistake early on, like they did with Ashworth. So yeah, drop your thoughts below, like, comment, subscribe if you're new. I'll be back soon. Maybe a bit less sniffly. I've not been feeling great for the last week or so. But yeah, hopefully I'll be back soon with performances that actually makes this patience case for Ruben Amorim. So yeah, talk to you later.